He was the only opposing player Sir Alex Ferguson ever paid attention to in the Premier League. I mean, he would mention Alan Shearer and other major opposing players in team talks, but never with any fear. However, this guy always had him in a sweat. These are the words of legendary Man United goalkeeper Peter Schmeichel. So which 90s forward was he talking about? Ian Wright, Gianfranco Zola, David Ginola, Teddy Sheringham? It was none other than Liverpool's iconic winger Steve Mcmanaman. Born in Bootle, boyhood Everton fan Mcmanaman joined Liverpool as a 16-year-old apprentice in 1988 after impressing in school football tournaments. He spent 2 years in the youth setup before making his first team debut in 1990. The sale of several aging veterans and injuries to key players like John Barnes meant that a 19-year-old Maka got the opportunity to impress boss Graham Souness and seal a place in the team at the start of the 91-92 season. And that's exactly what he did. A tall lanky lad with long spindly legs, Mcmanaman was blessed with great pace. A classic wide boy, his two-footedness meant he could do a job on either flank. An incredibly hard worker with boundless stamina, he would run himself into the ground for his team and often cause chaos in the final third with his smart and accurate passing and intelligent runs. These attributes were not what most caught the eye when watching the youngster though. He was an excellent dribbler of the ball and absolutely fearless too, so he had no reservations in running at and skinning vastly more experienced players. His industry, energy and skill quickly made him undroppable in Souness's eyes, and he went on to make 51 appearances in all competitions, scoring 11 goals. The highlight of Maka's full debut season was undoubtedly the FA Cup final against Sunderland. Deployed out left during the first half, he was handled well by Bracewell and struggled to make a real impact. In a tactical masterstroke which changed the course of the game, he was switched over to the right hand side after half time, where he had Armstrong and Atkinson on toast. Just 2 minutes into the second period, he did the two Sunderland players for pace and skill before chipping a genius ball through to Michael Thomas, who finished on the volley. This opened the floodgates and Liverpool started to swarm all over Sunderland, adding a second 20 minutes after the first through Ian Rush. The game ended 2-0 and so Maka had a maiden campaign to remember as he got his hands on the FA Cup and was named man of the match. The following season saw him cement his status as one of the most exciting young prospects in the country, alongside Manchester United winger Ryan Giggs. The two players were eerily similar in the way they would strike fear into the opposition with their flawless dribbling, giving defenders nightmares for weeks after facing off against them. As is typical of many young wingers, there wasn't always an accurate or appropriate product at the end of his mazy runs, but the potential was there for all to see. He ended the season with 4 goals and 6 assists in 31 Premier League appearances. Mcmanaman started the next season brightly, scoring 2 and assisting 1 against Swindon Town on match day 3. His form suffered and his confidence was rocked a few weeks later after a notorious incident with his teammate, madcap goalkeeper Bruce Grobbelaar. Maka tried to clear an Everton corner but meekly flapped at it, only succeeding in diverting it towards Mark Ward, who tucked it home. Grobbelaar was furious at his young winger and the two came to blows. Overall, the season was an important one for the player and the club for a few reasons. Firstly, because it saw the breakthrough of one of Mcmanaman's best friends, striker Robbie Fowler. If the two were considered close mates off the pitch, then they were virtually conjoined twins sharing one brain on it. Such was the extent of their understanding. Secondly, that campaign saw the departure of Graham Souness in January after being dumped out of the FA Cup by Bristol. He was succeeded by Roy Evans. Keen to make the most of McManaman's versatility, Evans freed him from the constraints of having a fixed position and gave him free license to take his dribbling on tour to cover any part of the pitch he felt like. From this time until he left Liverpool, Steve McManaman was one of the best midfielders in the league, as he snaked his way around pitches up and down the country, stacking up man of the match performances as he was at it. There was a sense of anticipation from the crowd anytime he received the ball, and he was one of the few players in the league who was guaranteed to lift spectators out of their seats in excitement.
Crowd willing him to go forward, always a buzz of excitement, and he gets possession.
He was also a talismanic player for the Reds, their own version of Cantona or Zola, capable of taking the team to new heights. No match typified this more than the 1995 League Cup final, a fixture in which he scored a sensational solo goal to open the scoring. Liverpool went on to win 2-1, and McManaman created so many opportunities and pulled the strings for the Reds to such an extent that the match is known to this day as the McManaman final. Indeed, the wizard of the dribble, Sir Stanley Matthews, was so impressed with the player that he said after the match, he reminds reminds me of me when I was playing. I wish there were more dribblers like him. He was such a threat that managers eventually had to instruct a member of their squad to man mark and follow Mcmanaman every game. Under the all-action pass and move style of Evans, Liverpool undoubtedly played the most attractive and aesthetically pleasing football in the league. Or at least they could. Because the only thing you could be sure of with that Liverpool side is that you never knew which one was going to turn up. They were infamously inconsistent, capable of picking up huge results and blowing away teams like Blackburn, Man United, Newcastle or Arsenal, and then going on to lose 1-0 to the likes of Wimbledon or Coventry. It became readily apparent that Mcmanaman was so important to the team that if he was having an off day and not playing well, then the team would also perform poorly. As Brian Robson pointed out, everyone in the Premiership knows that if you stop Mcmanaman, you stop Liverpool. And it was during this time that Alex Ferguson became obsessed with doing just that, to the point that Schmeichel recalls that his team talks before facing Liverpool were so Mcmanaman-centric that they had become like Groundhog Day. Before the 96 FA Cup final, Ferguson had decided that a 19-year-old Phil Neville would be tasked with sticking to and shadowing Mcmanaman. However, after consultation with some senior squad members, Ferguson opted against the plan and United would go on to win 1-0 via a late Cantona goal and a relatively low-key encounter. Indeed, the most exciting thing that happened was that the whole Liverpool team had turned up in off-white Armani suits and paraded around the Wembley turf before kick-off, with the most notorious photos featuring Mcmanaman, Fowler and Redknapp, who, along with players like David James and Jason McAteer, were dubbed the Spice Boys due to the fact they were rumoured to prefer the VIP section of China Whites to cold, rainy nights in Coventry. A criticism often levelled at Mcmanaman during his time at Liverpool was his lack of goals. Perhaps it's a little harsh given the fact that in his 9 seasons at Liverpool, he scored 66 in all competitions, just 10 less than Ryan Giggs managed in the same time frame. Besides, when you have such prolific, clinical and natural strikers as Robbie Fowler and Michael Owen in your team, it's not so necessary to chip in with tons of goals as long as you are feeding the front men. And feed them he did, because Macca's middling goal scoring record was more than made up for by his assist figures, of which he got 86 for the club. His most prolific season on that front was the 95-96 campaign where he laid on 20 for his teammates, including a stupendous 15 in the league. And although he didn't score loads, when he did find the back of the net, they more often than not tended to be screamers. His sensational solo goal against Celtic in 1997 was a prime example of that. His last 2 seasons with Liverpool were overshadowed by transfer rumours and contract disputes. A bizarre transfer saga with Barcelona, who had previously declared interest in acquiring the player, saw an alleged $12 million deal fall through as they were apparently unable to agree on personal terms. A bid from Juventus was rejected. A new contract could not be sorted out, and with his deal entering the final year, he publicly expressed his dream of playing abroad and regularly in the Champions League, a competition in which he had yet to feature. On 30th of January 1999, he signed a pre-contract agreement with Real Madrid. Throughout this whole debacle, Mcmanaman was painted in a bad light by the media, who accused him of being a greedy mercenary, lacking loyalty, a shining example of the rotting modern game. His performances on the pitch suffered, with his final season at the club being a lacklustre one, with some Liverpool fans even turning on him, branding him as a Judas, a traitor or a greedy bastard. He overcame the boo boys and rediscovered his form in the last few days of the season, and was given a standing ovation as he took a lap of honour on the pitch in his final match at Anfield. Mcmanaman was 27 when he joined Real Madrid in July 1999, and a player in his prime. He was the most high-profile Englishman to arrive in Spain since Gary Lineker. Overcoming initial feelings of loneliness and homesickness, he became an instant hit with the fans, assisting Morientes' late equaliser against Mallorca on Madrid's first game of the season. He scored in the following fixture, his first match at the Bernabeu. He wasn't exactly a regular in the league in his debut season though, amassing just 19 starts in La Liga, scoring 3 and assisting 3. He was, however, the main man for Madrid in their Champions League campaign, and put in several man-of-the-match performances on the way to the final against Valencia, a match which Real would win comfortably by 3-0, with Macca bagging the second and Sir Alex having this to say about his performance. I thought Mcmanaman was excellent. There is no question he was man of the match. He was a threat all night and gave Real great penetration from midfield. By getting his hands on the Champions League with Madrid and playing a big part in that triumph, he had proved to the doubters back home he had come to Spain for glory and to write his name in the history books. Despite his Champions League heroics, the appointment of Florentino Perez as president and subsequent arrival of the first Galactico Luis Figo saw Macca's position in the side under threat as Perez looked to balance the books. Offers from Middlesbrough, Chelsea and Lazio were accepted by the board, but Macca, who had 4 years left on a lucrative contract, was in no rush to go anywhere and was determined to stay and fight for his place, which he he did, working his way back into the first team after spending the first 2 months of the season on the bench. He was again an important player, providing 8 goals and 2 assists as he helped Real Madrid to a first La Liga title in 4 years. As more Galacticos arrived every year, Mcmanaman had to continuously reinvent himself and play in different roles and positions to get minutes on the pitch. The fans adored Maca during his time there, as the Spanish media would often report on his love of Spanish culture and of life in the capital. He immersed himself in it and learned Spanish while there. He was arguably more talismanic than some of the vastly more expensive Galacticos, being voted as the supporters' favourite player twice during his time there. A consummate gentleman, he was extremely popular and well liked by his teammates and coaches, who saw all the exemplary work he did for the team on and off the field. In his remaining 2 seasons at the Bernabeu, he would win the Champions League again in 2002, scoring in the semi-final against Barcelona, and La Liga for the second time in 2003, making him one of the most successful English footballers to ever play abroad. In 158 appearances for Los Blancos, he scored 14 and assisted 20. He joined Man City in 2003, where he spent 2 mediocre, injury-disrupted seasons before retiring from football in 2005. Maca is a legend of club football and a hugely popular figure at his former clubs Madrid and Liverpool. But what about at international level? Well, his first major tournament for the Three Lions was Euro 96, which was hosted by England. Mcmanaman was in scintillating form for his country and was arguably England's best player. He got off to a blistering start against Switzerland, causing absolute chaos down the left wing in a game England drew 1-1. He built on this positive start and continued to put on masterful displays of delicious dribbling against Scotland and the Netherlands in the final group stage games. Working excellently well with his teammates like Paul Gascoigne, Alan Shearer and Terry Sheringham, they made it to the semis against Germany. After playing out a 1-1 draw in 90 minutes, Mcmanaman burst into the box at the start of extra time and cut it back to Anderton, who saw his effort strike the post. The game went to penalties and England lost, with Gareth Southgate missing his. So impressive was Mcmanaman at the Euros that Brazilian great Pelé had this to say about him. He's one of the players that has impressed me most. He's got great energy, great qualities, and is a constant threat to defences. He has pace and skill and isn't afraid to take defenders on and beat them. I love to see that in a player, and so do the fans. This was as good as it got for Mcmanaman and the England national team really, as he was criminally overlooked for virtually the rest of his career. Despite tearing the Prem to shreds, manager Glenn Hoddle ignored the winger who was known throughout his career to be something of a practical joker. In the end, Mcmanaman made only 37 appearances for England, scoring 3 goals.